About a year ago, the local people from the United Nations called me up and said, we're worried about sort of a rush to war and a lot of saber rattling, and was there anything I could do as a travel writer here in the Seattle area to help calm things down? And I said, really, the only thing I could do of any consequence would be to produce a TV show on Iran. And I said, I'm too busy to spearhead this, but I said, if you guys can get me the permission, I will get my crew together, we'll go over there and produce an hour show and get it run on public television. And it's complicated when you're trying to get permission to go to Iran as an individual. It's really complicated as an American film crew, you see. But we finally got our permission, and they didn't let us know we had our permission until just a week before we were going to go. We were filming in Athens, and we got the okay, so we had to pick up our visas in Athens. And it was just really quite interesting to go to the Iranian embassy in Greece, and it was a casual thing. We got our visas, and then a couple days later we're flying into Tehran. Now, when we went there, we didn't have a script. I had not been there since I was a kid. We had a friend go ahead and do some scouting. I had a general idea of what we wanted to film, but for me this was a personal mission of discovery. I wanted to know more about Iran. It was clear to me I didn't know much about Iran, and I'm a travel writer. I'm supposed to know about these things, and my neighbors didn't know much about Iran either. For a lot of us, history stopped with the embassy crisis and the hostage taking and all that kind of thing, and we've just been stuck in this, they're the enemy and we're at each other's, we're at odds. And I just really thought it must be worth knowing what's going on. I was nervous before I went. We almost left our big camera in Athens and took our little camera with us. I charged up all my batteries because I didn't even know how easy it would be to charge things in Iran. I heard there was no credit cards. You had to just bring cash with you. I didn't know how people were going to receive us. And we went there and we learned a lot. It really bothers me that I believe fear is being used against us in our society. And I just, time and time again, I found when I'm afraid of a place, I go there and I find it's not that scary. And what I believe I find is the fundamental humanness of different countries on this planet. This picture symbolizes to me the stress and struggles between our two societies. I wanted to see the place from a travel point of view. I made it really clear in my presentation to the Iranian government that we are interested in not politicizing it. I didn't want to deal with their funding of terrorism. I didn't want to deal with their treatment of homosexuals or Baha'is. I didn't want to deal with nuclear, issues. I just wanted to be a travel writer and go there and understand the culture, because it's a rich culture and it's 70 million people. I wanted to get the big city, I wanted to get little towns, countryside, and historic perspective. Right off the bat, we were met by Abdi, and Abdi was my friend in Seattle who's Iranian, who's grew up in Iran and works here in Seattle now. And he was my assurance that I wasn't being duped. I wanted a guy who was savvy with the local scene, that wasn't working for the Iranian government. And then we had our minder, Syed. And he's the same guy that took Ted Koppel around when he did his thing for Discovery. We couldn't do it without him and the blessing of the Iranian government. Now, as soon as we got to the airport, they met us and they took us to the CIP. That's not the VIP lounge, but the CIP lounge, the Commercially Important People Lounge. Okay? So we settled down there and we had our tea and our cookies and stuff. And the customs police came and Simon showed his passport. Simon's from New Zealand, and they said, welcome. And then I showed my passport, and they said, come with me. Okay. So they escorted me over, and I had to get fingerprinted. And I think there's my fingerprints there. I've never been fingerprinted before. When it comes to fingerprints, when they come here, if they're going to get in, they're going to get fingerprinted. So they're going to fingerprint us when we get there. We have to remember that. That's a reasonable thing, and I had to do that to get in. Right off the bat, you see, respected ladies, observe the Islamic dress code. I mean, it was clear this was not Denmark, okay? This is a different world, and this is what I was excited about. We were in good care with the government minder and with Abdi, and we went to our fancy hotel. In each city, there's a hotel for diplomats and wealthy people and big shots, and that's where they put us up. And there was a lot going on here. There was security. It was a very comfortable place. A lot of businessmen from around the Islamic world, mostly. Security gate to get in and out of the hotel. Fine rooms. A prayer room. Always in the hotels you had a prayer room if you wanted to have a few moments of worship. If you wanted a prayer and you didn't want to leave your hotel room, you could look up on the ceiling and there would be an arrow pointing to Mecca. From my 14th floor balcony, I could look out and see this is one incredible city, Tehran. More than 10 million people. So I was raring to go to get out there and to check out this city. But you have to do the polite, slow-moving, respectful kind of stuff. So we had to go to the Ministry of Guidance, which is the governmental organization overseeing the Ministry of Tourism, and sit there and have tea and watermelon with the big shot who got us into all the sites of our next 12 days of shooting, and his staff. So we sat around, and I'm saying, let's go shoot. I want to go to the subways. I want to go to the this and that, you know. But we did all of that stuff. This is cameraman Carl getting his photograph taken because we all needed to have our journalist passes. And they spelled our names in Farsi, so they transliterated so people knew that we were legit. And then, finally, we were out in the streets. And at this point, we didn't know what kind of reception we were going to get. But we were everywhere we wanted to go with our minder, who's always taking pictures of us, as we take pictures of everything else. And then we're quite a stir to have us, an American film crew, out and about on the streets of Iran. There's not a lot of great tourist attractions in Tehran. It's not one of the prettier cities around. They have this big Freedom Gate that's quite impressive to see, that has stylistic roots that are a reminder that this society goes back 500 years before Christ to the great Persian Empire times. Our guide, Sayed, spent a lot of time with plainclothes security people explaining what we were doing. A lot of people wondered, Rick, are you just going to let them shelter you from all of the reality and you're not going to get the real story? Well, you know what my mission was. It wasn't to be 60 minutes and go in for all the bad stuff. I just wanted to show what life was like for real people in Iran and gain an appreciation for their culture. Given that, I felt I was able to go everywhere I wanted to go and get the information I wanted to get. I'm very clear about that. Sayed, our minder's responsibility was to stay with the camera. I could go anywhere I liked as a tourist, and I did. And I had a lot of fun doing that as the cameraman was doing his work with producer Simon. But every time the camera went somewhere, the minder had to go with him to protect the camera, to deal with security people, and to make sure we're not shooting things that are getting people into trouble. What could not we shoot? We couldn't shoot governmental buildings. We couldn't shoot banks for some reason. And we couldn't shoot in little businesses that let people break the laws. You know, I mean, we wanted to go into the clubs and show people holding hands and girls not wearing their scarf correctly. And the club owners were like in sync with us. They would love to share this information. But if they had video evidence that they were not following the rules of the Islamic Republic of Iran, they could lose their license. And they have many times in the past when a film crew proves that people are allowed to do it's like letting underage people drink in our bars, to have any sort of public display of affection or racy dress or alcohol consumption. So we didn't get to film there, and I didn't want to push it. I was happy with what we got for our purposes. The city was crazy, and the traffic was mesmerizing to me. The amazing thing about the traffic in Tehran is you have 10 lanes coming together with no traffic lights. Now, I've seen that in different parts of the world, but it's because the traffic lights are broken. Here, they just didn't want traffic lights. I mean, they come together, they sift through it, and they break out of that, and they continue on. And that's just the way they do it. Now, I might have thought this is crazy, but who am I to judge? It works for them, and it actually works okay. We were meeting people all the time. And I've never been anywhere in my travels where I met more people and had more access to people on the streets. I mean, you see a lot of people, you bump into a lot of people in Europe, but you don't talk to people all the time. When I was in Iran, everybody, there was soldiers, bookstore people, and so on, wanted to talk. And I did this thing where I'm tall and I don't look very Iranian, and I would get, as soon as I got eye contact, that's what I needed to do. As soon as I got eye contact, people would say, welcome, hello. And in Iran, a foreigner is a gift from God, literally. I mean, they treat you like a gift from God. That's in their culture. And they would always take very good care of us. I was stuck in a traffic jam. You just saw that. And the car next to us said, roll down your window. And they said, you've got a guest in the back seat. Give him this bouquet and apologize for the traffic jam. I mean, can you imagine that on our streets? And I just shook my head and I thought, there's a lot about this country I didn't appreciate until I came here, you know? You've got a foreigner in your back seat. Take this bouquet. It was like that. So I walk around and I get eye contact with people that say, hello. I say, hello. Invariably, they'd say, where are you from? And I would never say America. I would say, where do you think I'm from? And they would guess. And I'd make them guess. And they'd guess 5 or 6 countries. I can't remember once that they'd get it right. Finally, they'd run out of guesses, and they say, "Where are you from?" And I said, "United States." "Oh, America." Then they go, it kind of shocked them, and then they'd think, "What are you doing here?" And then they'd say, "Welcome." And usually they'd say, "I like America," or something like this. And then we'd talk politics, and they'd tell me what they think of our president, or something like this. But honestly, I didn't know what to expect, and I have never been in a place where, ironically, where being an American was such an asset. It was thoroughly an asset to be an American individual there, okay? So make of that what you will. I just think it was a fascinating thing. I went into a bookstore. It was the equivalent of the U bookstore. Fat, beautiful books, lots of poetry. I had to be taught that they read them from what we call the back to the front. And I just admired the books. And then I said, they brought us tea and everything. And I was leaving, and the lady said, I wasn't going to buy anything. So she said, "Here, take one of these as a gift from us." You know, and it just doesn't happen at the university bookstore here. But again, it was that kind of like, how do I handle this? Welcome. I mean, it was just quite nice. When you go to Iran, it is clear from day one that these people have traded away their freedom for a theocracy. This really bugs me. I had the creeps because of the bigness of government and the lack of freedom. You know, I say a lot of progressive things, and a lot of people think I'm not appreciative of freedom. I am such a fan of freedom. I mean, that's why I travel, is to learn and understand this kind of dynamic better. And there are reasons Americans trade away our freedom, aren't there? We've been known to trade away our freedom. We've done a lot of it lately. And there are reasons that Iranians trade away their freedom. And when I went there, I realized it's motivated by fear and love, okay? They love their kids. They want to raise them like good Muslims. They're afraid of encroaching Western values. They've got reason to be afraid of Western imperial culture. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I'm trying to understand what motivates a country to have a guy like Ahmadinejad as their president. There are reasons for this, and I believe it's fear and love. Now, when you go to Iran, you see how people love their children. And you hear them talking about Imam Khomeini, revolution is the revolution of values. It's been a big catchword in our political discourse for the last 15 years, I think. Family values, right? And family values can be any number of things. Well, in Iran, they don't want their little girls to be grown up like Britney Spears or Paris Hilton. That's what terrorizes these parents. And they will willingly give up the separation of mosque and state in order to have a theocracy, knowing they're going to trade away their freedom, which they wish they didn't have to, but their concern for their kids and the environment they're going to grow up in trumps their need for freedom, okay? Again, I don't know what the answers are. I think it's very complex. But what strikes me is how little energy Americans put into understanding this before just saying, they're the axis of evil, and then we're the great Satan. And there's this kind of bombast that we have to deal with. And the bombast, what I've learned is politicians on either side shoring up their base. Why would one politician say bomb, 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 bomb Iran, and another one, even from the other party, say we'll obliterate Iran if they do this? And then why would they say we'll bomb them out of existence, you know? Who are they talking to? I don't think they're talking to people in the other country. I think they're shoring up their base. So Ahmadinejad's base is the small town, frightened, fundamentalist, less educated, majority of the population in Iran, I would imagine. When we hear that discourse, I think we've got to understand that. And when we look at Iran, I think we've got to understand that there are ways when we can have this people-to-people get-together that undercuts the fear and makes it tougher for them to demonize us. But we have to understand the roots of this. For us, history with Iran starts, for most of us who aren't historians, in 1978 or whenever the hostage crisis is, right? What did you know about it before that? Just the Shah, he was our man, a dictator, kind of a tough guy, but at least we got the oil, right? Well, for the Iranians, the history starts in 1953 with us. And in 1953 is the year Britain and the United States and the CIA threw out their democratically elected prime minister. Why did we throw him out? Because he nationalized their oil, making it tough for Western oil companies to get their hands on Iranian oil. And what they did, the CIA, and there's no dispute about this, it's not a liberal sort of a claim, it's just a history. They threw out their prime minister, and they put the Shah back into power, who was friendly to private foreign ownership of Iranian natural resources, okay? That really is hard to swallow for a lot of Iranians, and for their lifetime of their parents, from 53 to 78, they had to live with a guy, the Shah, as their dictator. Now, if you had to live with the Shah as your dictator and you were a fundamentalist Muslim, you'd be really irked at whoever put him and kept him in power. I think it'd be natural for you to be irked. So it's a theocracy. It's not free. There's no apologies about it. It's just not free. They're not anti-freedom. They're pro-Muslim values. Okay? And you look around and you find the evidence of that. I mean, on every street corner, literally, there's an alms box, for instance. Because Muhammad said, be concerned about the poor people. And if you stick a couple of bucks in here, we can fund the orphanage. So you find all over Iran these reminders of the fact that it is a theocracy. Now, I was interested because I'm interested in what makes totalitarian governments, non-free governments, tick. And I related a lot to the Soviet Union. When I was in Iran, I kept thinking about the Soviet Union. It's the same pattern, the same tactic, and it's two different ideologies. One is motivated for economic ideology, the other is religious ideology. But you got the same kind of ways to maintain control and shape people's minds. In the United States, it's capitalism, materialism. And everywhere we go, advertising is drummed into us. Every billboard, it's making us buy stuff. Go to the TV channels, it's making us buy stuff. Look at the sweatband of some great athlete, it's making us buy stuff. Go to an airport and sit in a gate. You have to listen to CNN with their advertising. Try turning one of those TVs off. It's illegal. They're getting paid to run it. So this is us. We are commercial creatures. You go there, late at night in the hotel, you go through your upper channels. Here you'd see Shopping Channel, all this kind of stuff. Over there, it's Mecca Live. It's meditational images to pray by. It's fascinating. You wander around, you don't feel the energy in the economy because they're not driven to make money. They're driven to drum into you their ideology, which is a theocracy. It's Islam. Every time you're looking at a country's political and economic sort of discourse, you got to discount what they're saying if they're sitting on oil. Any politician, Hugo Chavez, Sarah Palin, Ahmadinejad, if they talk to you about tax policies and what they do for their people and they get all this free money from oil, you got to discount it, don't you? Well, Ahmadinejad can do all sorts of stuff. His people don't pay taxes. They don't need to be efficient. They got money rolling in from oil. I just think that is really quite interesting. When you're out and about, you see billboards, and they're not advertising billboards. There's some, but mostly it is propaganda billboards. All the billboard space is dedicated to propaganda. Some of it's religious, and some of it is hateful, okay? This would be, I can't read this, but it's probably a guy who died in the war against Iraq. Saddam Hussein invaded Iran in the 1980s, and Iran lost 250,000 people. That's a big deal. That's more than a Vietnam. So this is a martyr, and you got your religious leader and your political leader saying martyrs are heroes, and they go right to heaven, and we should all stand strong against Western imperialism. That's drummed into them all the time. Martyrs marching into the setting sun. It's a beautiful thing if you die for God and country, you see. It's driven into a lot of countries, I think. God and country, God and country. We were on top, we wanted to get this one here. This is a famous one. And we got up on top of a building to shoot it right. And you got skulls for stars and dropping bombs for stripes. And it's sad to see this. It hurts me to see this. And I had to struggle with this in my visit. And I wondered, what do they mean? Who's putting this up? What impact does it have on the people? Do people really buy this stuff? And so on. And it really was a heavy experience. Some of them say beautiful things out of the Quran, you know, care for your loved ones, take care of people that are not as fortunate as you, all that kind of stuff. And then you got this great Satan, destroy Israel kind of stuff. So, death to America, what do you make of it? Well, I don't know, that was our mission to learn more about this. I was on that same day in traffic, and we were stuck in another traffic jam, and suddenly, my driver just blurted out, "Death to traffic." And I remember going, what? I mean, I was just thinking death to Israel, death to America, death to traffic. And I had to ask him, what's that about? And he said, well, in Iran, anytime we're frustrated by something that's like out of our control, we say death to it. It's in their, what do you call it, lexicon, their jargon. And I thought about that quite a bit. And I thought about how many times I've heard people say, damn those teenagers. Do you really mean you want them to die and burn in hell for eternity? I don't think so. Now, I don't want to excuse or belittle the whole death to Israel thing at all. But I do think it behooves us to recognize that it's more complicated than what some commercial news hysteria might pound into our heads, or some politician that might be playing into our fears. We need, as citizens, to expect a little more of each other than to be wrapped up in this hysteria when the consequence of us not getting it is very expensive. It's very expensive, and that haunted me in my 12 days in Iran. The importance that we sort this out, because I didn't really think the people I was meeting on the streets looked at this stuff and thought death to America, you know. I wanted to know, where are the free spirits in Iran? And I just thought, I'm going to the university. I went to the greatest university in Iran, and we went in there, we had permission, and I said, where's the student union building, you know? Here at the university, you got the student union building, and that's where all the action is, and all the anarchists, and the communists, and the hedonists, and the who knows what. And I went there, and this is one of the most discouraging parts of my whole trip. To go to the university and see nothing but compliance, nothing but conformity, nothing but students who get free education kissing up to professors that have their jobs because they embrace the ideology of the theocracy. And it's happened for 30 years now. And you got to think, half of the people in Iran are less than 30 years old. Who's writing their textbooks, and what are those textbooks trying to get them to think? You add into that the fact that they're very Western media savvy, and they've got a huge blogosphere and web kind of action, and they know what's going on, but still, higher education is very conformist, okay? People were delightful to talk to, people were very sweet, but when I walked around on the campus, there wasn't a bit of graffiti, there wasn't a bit of posters, nothing was out that wasn't ordained by the system. Having said that, I've looked at videos, I've talked to friends in Iran, and since I got home, there's plenty going on behind the scenes, some very savvy, cosmopolitan, you know, people that completely do their own thing, but it's effectively hidden from the public. And when you go to the university, it's toe the line. And I really take that as a warning if around in our country. To me, the university environment is sacred. This is where people should be able to piss off the government, you know? This is where you should send your kids and they can learn all the things that you didn't teach them, just so that they can get character and make their choices and be self-assured, free-thinking, free individuals. I love it when we have that aspect that carbonates the whole intellectual discourse and political discourse in our society. And if you don't appreciate that, go to a country that doesn't have it and see what you think if you had it your way, completely from top to bottom. It's pretty boring. It's pretty boring. Now, there's a big issue about women, and I really wanted to figure this out, because you hear about women who have to cover up and women who have to go in the back of the bus, and it just reminds me a lot of blacks in our country when they had to sit in the back of the bus and so on. So you go into the subway and you see women only here. Well, the average American in a quick look would say, well, that's crummy. Women are here, men are there. But then you look at it a little more closely and you realize, well, women go in the men's car. There's a woman, but men don't go in the women's car. I talked to the women there about this. And they said, well, maybe in New York in the subway, the women would appreciate it if they had one car that was reserved just for them. And I just thought, wow, I never thought of that. And I would be so quick to judge them and think they're bad and wrong to have a car for women. And it's just something that they have found a different solution. It humbles me. Every time I get self-assured, I go to a place and I realize, oh, there's a different way to look at it. And I'm so thankful for that, and I celebrate that. And when I find people here that don't have passports, that know all the answers about how evil they are, it really frustrates me. The state of women in Iran is a matter of respect. Women do not worship with the men in the mosque. Well, that's happened in churches and synagogues also. It's not right now, but we got to be honest about that. And you read the Bible and it says, women obey your husband, and husband respect your women, and so on. It's not unique to Islam. When you look at women there, some women agree, most don't, but many do. 70% of the women statistically would like to have more freedom to wear what they like in public, but 30% of them think this is the modest way to be. But the reason they're told to cover up is out of respect for women. Anything can go in the domestic world, but in public it's different, you see. Women cannot show the shape of their body, they can't show hair, and no neckline. And when you look at, my measure of what is the correct woman's presentation in public is to look at the women who work for the TV stations in Iran. Whenever you see somebody who's a spokesperson for the government, she will be perfectly attired. Not a single strand of hair will show, and a very tight thing here, you know. Now, so there's a proper way for the woman to dress respectfully in public, and then there are bad girls that get away with murder, with the style, you know. You go on the street, and you see beautiful women who are out in public pushing it a little bit. Now, I never saw a neckline the whole time I was there. What you do is, this is what's exciting, a little bit of hair, all right? Right here, just a little hair. And when no cameras around or when no authorities are around, the scarf goes back and the hair comes out. And I found my eyes going right here. It was a real weird sort of thing, and I just felt like, wow, dig that hair. And it was, psychologically, it was a trip. Because, I mean, I'm a people watcher. I love looking at men and women when I'm traveling. And in Iran, no shape of body, no neckline, no hair. This is it. This is what it's all about. So here you see a beautiful, nice accessories, beautiful hair, a woman who is looking good on the street of Tehran. They have more nose jobs per capita in Iran than any other country. Why not? You can show your face. Let's make it really good. Beautiful people, modest, but they are not beyond being appealing to the opposite sex when they're out and about. It's fascinating stuff to observe. If you're wealthy and cosmopolitan and Western, you will go to the rich part of Tehran. And there you've got places that are just as expensive as our fancy suburbs, you know, and malls and everything. And you find people, these women are, technically they're covered up, but you'd hardly notice it. You know, they're pretty decadent, and they're wealthy, and they can get away with it. There's lots of business metabolism, but because of the 30-year-old embargo from the United States, there's no American chains, no obvious American companies, and no international banking. I couldn't use my credit card. It's a cash society. People buy cars with suitcases full of cash there. So there's this kind of, they just live with it. It's the American embargo. You know, life, you just develop it. There's a lot of countries that have been living with American embargoes, and life goes on. And if you want to see the elite, you go into this rich area, you pay to get into a fancy park, and you hang out with people who have seen it all. Even here, public display of affection was pretty muted. Seeing people holding hands was about it. That was really quite racy. And it was fun to talk to these people. By the way, everybody who's educated, I found, spoke some English. There was not much of a language barrier for me there. Not because they're talking to Americans a lot, but it's just what you learn to talk with people from other countries. The country is dry. There's no alcohol. I thought, well, sure, but I mean, in the rooftop garden of my Intercontinental Hotel in Tehran, I can get a beer. Nope, nothing, okay? So you have something that feels like a beer and looks like a beer and tastes like a beer. It's a malt beverage, and the local Budweiser guys have that, and they drink it all the time, but it's non-alcoholic beer. As I mentioned, my impression was a very strict and effective legislation of morality. You just don't take drugs, you don't have easy sex, you don't dress this way, and that was the impression a visitor gets. Everybody who knows Iran or lives in Iran tells me behind in domestic quarters, if you know what phone number to call, you can get anything delivered to your door, okay? I didn't see any indication of hard drugs except for one little vial of something that I saw in a garden there, but I know that goes on, and it's just sort of there's a parallel world that is beyond my casual view. The Shah, kind of his ghost is there. You just feel everything that used to be called the Shah Square or the Shah Mosque is now called Khomeini Square and Khomeini Mosque. And of course, the Shah used to be on all the money, now Khomeini is on all the money. So it's just one radical swing of the pendulum from the far-right dictator to the far fundamentalist Muslim dictator, basically. The Shah's palaces are now museums, and they're showcases to remind the young people what a horrible dictator their parents grew up under. If we were living under the Shah, we'd have his palaces open and kids would go there on field trips also. When you go to the Shah's place, all the kids dress up from school and go there. They learn the whole propaganda line that this evil man was put in here by the United States and he kept us down and we had to live this horrible decadent way because they wanted our oil and they wanted to make us all like Christians or all like Jews instead of like good Muslims like we want to be. I would imagine that's what gets drilled into their heads, and that's a very interesting problem that we need to reckon with. Why are they telling their kids this? because a lot of it is understandable, if not true, that they feel this way. They were proud to take us to the American embassy. It was like, when are we going to go to the embassy? I'm sure you're an American film crew, you want to go to the embassy. And of course we did. And of course, this is what most Americans know about Tehran, is the embassy. In 1978, the students, 78, 79, the students came in and overran it, and they took 50 or 60 Americans hostage, held them hostage for 400 and some days. We remember it quite well, I think. It's an interesting thing, this whole hostage crisis. I think it's interesting to talk to locals there about why, what motivated them, and so on. A lot of people think they wanted to radicalize the revolution. It could have been a moderate revolution, but if they antagonized the United States and polarized it, it's what happens in revolutions. Certain characters want to make it more radical, and you do that by blasting out the middle. If you humiliate the United States, you make the United States more angry at us, it's easier to demonize the United States, and everybody runs to the extremes, all right? That's what happened there, I believe, and that radicalized the revolution, and that was 30 years ago. Today, most Iranians were not even born at that time, and it still is part of their psyche. When we went there, they had the graffiti, the murals, the political murals on the walls, quite clear. They've got the chipped out flag, embassy medallion and so on. And you look at all these horrible images mixing the United States and war and killing and Israel and all this. And you look at the young people walking to work by it every day. And you wonder, is this white noise for these people? Or do they look at it and does it really make them go, yeah, death to America? My hunch is young people just have to get on with it, you know. It's just like a lot of kids will do whatever you tell them to do at church or at school for Pledge of Allegiance, or they just mouth it or something. And do they really think about those words? You just gotta say it. And in Iran, I'm sure the kids just gotta say death to Israel. And you even feel it's a little bit of a limp rote response when they do this, but it's propaganda top down, and it kind of gets, I think, as they get numb to it as well. That's my hunch. It is sure good vivid imagery. When I travel, I really enjoy seeing the power that political murals can do for whatever cause they're trying to represent. And here, of course, you see the grip of the world as the American empire controls everything. We've got military bases in 130 countries. We spend as much as everybody else in our military put together, and you can't get elected in America without spending more, and Israel is the 51st state. You know, there's all of this stuff that the people are going to hear, and when you combine that with vivid imagery that Al Jazeera can put together, it's quite believable that there is a great Satan out there that has its sights set on Iran. And why does Pakistan get a bomb and they don't? You know, I'm certainly not justifying, I'm just telling you it's not an easy issue just to tell people, just make do, just be compliant, we'll be good to you, we promise. You know, it doesn't sell very well because there's not a lot of credibility. So this is the guy, Khomeini, that replaced the Shah, and he's on all the money today. I grew up thinking Khomeini was this scary, mean, never smiling, you know, guy. And you get there, and he has a different persona among devout Muslims in Iran. He's an approachable, wise, lovable elder. And I felt, people told me that, and I said, yeah, right. I went to his mosque where he's buried, and on certain days, there's 1 million people in this mosque. We were there on a very quiet day. And there's such a casual ambience in the mosque. I've never seen it in a mosque before. Kids were kicking the soccer ball. Families were having a little picnic. Old men were sitting reading all day right next to his tomb. And I don't understand Khomeini's appeal. And I don't think most Americans do. He's just easy to put on TV and hate. But there must be something about him that appeals to frightened, less educated, fundamentalist, small-town Muslims in Iran. This is his tomb here. This is all money. And we headed outside. We wanted to get out of the big city, and we were looking for slice-of-life stuff in the countryside. And, you know, it's everywhere. It was so fun just to stop and talk to a shepherd. It's a scene right out of ancient times, you know. And we had a good time filming that. And then we went to a village called Abiana, and very hot and dusty sort of world. This town was quite famous with tourists for having 2 different knockers on every door. And one knocker was for men, and one knocker was for women. And I thought, well, what's with that? And then I learned, well, if you're a woman inside and you hear the knock and it's a woman, great, get up and answer the door. No problem. If it's a man, you got to get all fixed up in order to answer the door. So it's just a very practical way to tell who's knocking. In this town, I was having so much fun with the people. And I'm telling you, it was just a delight to be on the streets of Iran. And in this village, I'll never forget the tourists from Tehran, the wealthy, big-time local tourists were coming to this village just like we were. And the Iranian tourists, they were kind of put off because the villagers would not let the big city Iranians take their photograph, but they would love to take their photograph with an American. And they're all just clowning around with me in America and so on. And it was just very interesting, the dynamic there. But we found a nice welcome wherever we went. People in Iran love to put out flags. There's flags everywhere. And what they do is they have huge collections of flags. And I think it's their way of just excluding the United States, Britain, and Israel. I noticed the only time you see an American flag is on a mural, one of those things I just showed you. I mentioned that because of the American embargo, there's no international banking. So they've got ATMs, but they're only for local people. There's a lot of rials in $1. 10,000 rial equals $1. So I think $100 makes a million rial then. And this is Abdi, our tour guide and my friend. And I was amazed when he paid hotel bills. It was like, how many zeros are you counting there? And Abdi, we'd count it double and everything. And Abdi explained to me that the country doesn't mint big bills. Local banks do or something. And you got to make sure it's for real. And one way to tell is you rub the number, and the heat of your finger makes the number disappear, and then it comes back, and that would be not counterfeit. Here we have the greatest view from a sightseeing point of view, I would say, in all of Iran. This is the great Imam Square in Isfahan, clearly the most exciting city to see in Iran. If you're a sightseer, glorious tile mosques, wonderful grand bazaar. A lot of people have been to the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul. This puts that to shame because there's nothing for tourists. It's all just for real people doing their real shopping. And you go through here, and it's just a carnival of color and fragrance and friendly people, and people just doing their chores. Persian carpets, great opportunity. Real frustrating for them because they'd love to sell them to America, but it's very tough with the embargo. There's creative ways to get around it, but this embargo is for real for Iran. But you look at the people, and you just feel, I want to be this man's friend. I just really want to understand these people. I was impressed in Iran how there's not that many little places to eat and drink. You go to a huge mall or a bazaar, and it's hard to find any place to sit down and eat or drink. And I don't quite know why, but we had to look carefully to find little tea houses hiding away where we could sit down and take a little break. Part of it is just there's not a lot of extra money floating around for that kind of thing. Now here we have Abdi and Syed discussing something. And this, for me, was really interesting because we wanted to get all the good stuff, and we had to, Syed was on our side, but he had to explain what's possible and what's not, because it's complicated. It's just, you're an international film crew, you can't go in there and so on. And one of the big deals for me, I wanted to shoot a prayer service. I mean, the odd thing when you're in Iran, it's not that clear that this is a theocracy. You don't see a lot of minarets, you don't hear a call to prayer like you do in Istanbul or Morocco. It's kind of odd. And when I look at the people, this is just my take on this, I thought it was very ironic. They've got a top-down, ordained theocracy. You've got to be faithful, And I felt there was a lot of lip service to the religion. I didn't feel a vibrant, strong, grassroots kind of faith like I felt in other secular Islamic countries, where I just felt a lot of strong, from the heart or from the gut, Muslim faith. I'm not sure about this, but I do think there's an interesting irony. If you are a passionate Christian and you wish everybody thought like you did, and you had a chance to make your government a Christian government so the kids would have to pray in school and they'd all have to dress right and everybody would celebrate the same holidays because you care about people's salvation, I'm just telling you, I think the ironic result of that is you'd have a country that was less faithful than if you just educated people and gave people reason to live their lives the way God wanted them to be lived. That's the beauty of the separation of church and state, even if you're a Christian ideologue, and that's the pragmatic rightness of the separation of mosque and state if you're a Muslim ideologue. Interesting to think about. So, we went to the big mosque. I went there wanting to look at it as a generic worship service. And it was clear to me you could edit it in a way that it would look menacing, or you could edit it in a way that it would look like essentially like my church service that I go to Sunday here, okay? And it was clear to me as a TV producer, you can have an agenda and bring home what you want. You can take pictures of people bowing down and cut in gorillas jumping over barbed wire and lay on some jihadist music, and you get yourself one scary Muslim clip. You could do the same thing with Christians if you wanted to, and they do, you see. Or you could go there and film it the way I wanted to film it, which is more just neighborhood worship service. Well, this is the big mosque. We went there as tourists, and all the rugs were rolled up. It just felt like a chaotic parking lot, kind of. And I just couldn't even envision it full of people. And the next day, all the rugs were laid out properly, and the place was filled with worshipers. In Islam, when you have a big prayer service on Friday, you got soldiers, because it's just an indication of the tension in the Muslim world these days. If there's going to be some angry, fringe group that's going to shoot up some other Muslim group they don't like, it's probably going to be at a mosque. So they're always going to be worshiping with soldiers standing guard. It's not as prevalent until everybody bows down, and then you see the soldiers standing there. Okay? So we walked through all of these thousands of people worshiping halfway through the service, and we set up our tripod in the corner and just watched. And it was fascinating for me because we had to stand there for over an hour, and I just kept thinking how much this is like my church service. There's a sermon that goes too long. There's people bowing. There's passing of the peace. There's anxious little kids pulling on their dad's finger to go, and there's people whose cell phones go off and they go, oh, darn, I should have turned that thing off before the service. There's people catching my eye contact and winking and clowning around. And it just was very much like a church. Everybody was dressed up. The moms were on the other side of the curtain there because they had their zone where they prayed. Why do women pray apart from the men? Well, praying is very physical in Islam. So we're there filming this, and people are praying. And I asked my friend Abdi, what does this say? And it says, death to Israel. So you got this top-down propaganda ragging on these people. And you got the soldiers, you got the tension, and you got people that just want to praise God according to their faith. It was fascinating to watch the whole dynamic. And the friendly vibe I got there, I got a real friendly vibe standing there, and I felt rude walking in there, not one of in their faith. I'm obviously a Christian instead of a Muslim with a big camera, and we're just taking pictures of them, and they welcomed us there. And then afterwards, everybody shakes hand with the cleric, like we shake hand with the pastor on the way out of church, and everybody gathers in the narthex for coffee and cookies, right? Well, here it would be mulberries and to talk with the neighborhood. And they've got, because it's so hot, they've got a big courtyard. But everybody, there was the same conviviality after the Friday mosque prayer service as you'd have on the Sunday morning in a church. So you got the old timers shaking the tree, and you got a big sheet here gathering the mulberries, and the kids all scrambling for the berries, and everybody catching up on what's going on with the neighborhood, and you hear about so-and-so got into school, and what about your grandma? And it was just that kind of neighborhood scene after the mosque. I thought it was quite a charming situation. The cleric was all excited that we were there. He came running over and wanted to talk. He spoke English quite well. And, it was just a very poignant experience for me to witness that. Afterwards, people had all dressed up, and it was their Sunday, go to prayer, or Friday, go to prayer thing, and then they'd take pictures of the kids and be thankful that their family's healthy and feel good about worshiping God. Now, when you go to Iran, there's two different sects in the Muslim world, Shia and Sunni. 85% of the Islamic world is Sunni, 15% are Shia. The only real Shia power is Iran. And Iraq, we're learning about this now, is mostly Shia, but it was ruled by Sunni Saddam, a minority, who was the heavy-headed guy who'd keep his majority down, and that was not sustainable. Today, you're going to have a Shiite Iraq and a Shiite Iran, and they are going to be, natural allies because they're like Protestants in a Catholic world or something like this. People ask, is there religious freedom in Iran? And I wanted to know, what's the deal? Because I've got Baha'i friends who can't go to Iran because they'll get killed or they'll be in danger if they go to Iran. I asked my guides, I asked the Iranians that I met. Yes, there is religious freedom as long as you are not blasphemous to Muhammad. And Muhammad says he is the last prophet. So if your prophet, like Jesus, is before Muhammad, he's okay. Jesus is 600 years before Muhammad, no problem. In fact, Jesus and lots of Bible characters are revered in the Muslim faith. Baha'u'llah, who's the prophet of Baha'i people, is from the 19th century. Long after Muhammad, he's not okay. By their religion, they are offended by a prophet who's after Muhammad. Okay, that's their religion. And they've got a theocracy, and you cannot be a Baha'i in Iran. Now, I don't think that's okay, but they live by that, and that's something that they're not going to change. What do we do? That's a tough question. If I was a Baha'i, I'd get out of there, and find some other place. But I don't know. It's just, that's the reality. I asked my guide then, okay, it's religious freedom unless you're a Baha'i. In practice, if I'm a Christian or a Jew, can I get anywhere in society? He said, yeah. I said, what about the military or the government? He said, well, no, then you have to be a Muslim. I said, a Shiite Muslim? He said, yes. Practicing Shiite Muslim? Yes. Okay? So if you want to get anywhere in the military or the government, you got to be that religion. Now, a lot of Americans think that's disgusting, and then can you imagine a Muslim candidate for the President of the United States? No, you can't. It's not allowed here, just like a Christian's not allowed there to be their president, you see? I mean, that's the honest truth, isn't it? So we can be appalled at this stuff, but we got to take a hard look at ourselves, and we got to understand what motivates their strong feelings. There's some beautiful, beautiful things to see in Isfahan, and as Carl and Simon were working, I had a lot of time to work on my notes and so on. I'd be sitting down, try to find a private place to mind my own business, working on my papers and stuff, and invariably people would come over and want to talk. At first I was annoyed, and then I realized this is a delight. I've got everywhere I go in Iran, I've got friends, people that are well-educated, curious, and confused about America. They want to talk. If I look up, I got all these guys just looking down at me. Hi, where are you from? All right, we'll talk, you see. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And many times I wished I wasn't working so I could just have fun with all these people. If you ever want to go to Iran just on your own and have some fun, you'll meet lots of people, I can promise you that. I'm sure if you had free time, you would have no shortage of fun people to hang out with while you're traveling. And when I look at these little girls and I see their self-assuredness and their body language, I celebrate them. I just hope the best for them. And I want to have them not be afraid of the rest of the world, because I don't think they have any aggressive intentions. I just think they want to be able to live the way their culture wants them to live. We did a lot of walking around the streets, talking to people. I found there people were, happy to clown around with us and talk. I had to be careful because we're more casual and there's certain things you don't do. It's just impolite and puts people in awkward situations. I found that the mannequins even had to cover their heads. And we went down to the river, and that's where life really got relaxed and fun. I really enjoyed going down to the river because it seems like people were much more casual and candid there. They have a 6 or 8 or 10 mile long park on either side of the river, and in the late of the day when it gets cool and twilight, everybody's out. It's got to be one of the most beautiful ambiences, that you'd find just as people paseo kind of stuff I've seen anywhere in my travels. And we had plenty of chance to talk to people. And then we went to a martyrs cemetery. I mentioned the Iran-Iraq war. They lost, nobody knows exactly, but there was 1 million casualties in the war between Iran and Iraq, 1 million. And their front was a lot like the Western Front, I believe, in World War I. It was that kind of hellish situation. And Iran lost a couple 100,000 boys fighting Saddam Hussein, interestingly enough. Every town in Iran has a martyrs cemetery. And if you want a powerful experience as an American, go to their martyrs cemetery. And there you see all these flags flapping and all these beautiful faces and all of the loved ones without their dads or whatever. And very poignant to me was this image of a mother sitting on her son's tomb. And I looked at that and I just thought, it doesn't matter whose side she's on. This is a horrible situation. And I just thought that is an amazing tragedy. We filmed that. There's also a place for the unknown soldiers. A lot of mothers don't know where their son ended up. So they also mourn, but they sit on tombs that don't have a photograph and don't have a flag, thinking about their lost boy. And I just thought it was a very powerful experience. And it was odd to be an American there with a film crew welcomed by these people who were mourning like it happened last year. There was no problem with us being there. People invited us to eat with them on the tombs of their dead sons. And it occurred to me then that it's very important that we do not underestimate the spine of other people. It's so easy for us to say, we'll shock and awe them, We'll shock and awe them, as if one big thunderous bombing is going to make them all give up and let us tell them how to raise their kids. I don't think they will. I had a very, very well-educated, impressive woman cross the street, come right up to me and said, I want you to go home and tell your people that we are strong and we are united. And I want you to tell the truth. These people are proud. I saw so much constructive, get on with life, raise your kids, get an education, build your community, good people. And I thought in one day we could radicalize these people and all of a sudden have 70 million enemies sworn to fight us to the death. I cannot stress the power I felt for these people would be willing to just fight until the last man was dead on whatever front was there. There's got to be a more constructive way to get around the problems, and that's the challenge that we have ahead of us. But they're not going to be easy. We talked about this stuff as we drove. We spent a lot of time driving, and here's Carl and Syed and Abdi and Simon and me. We're just debating these issues. It was so interesting. We drove down a long stretch where there was huge security. They bulldozed a big mound of dirt so we couldn't see anything past that, and that's where their nuclear power plants were and all of that action. And our guide said, keep your cameras down. You shoot a picture here and we're in big trouble, you know. And I believed him. It was not allowed to take pictures of that. As we drove around, we found rich cultural heritage going back thousands of years. Marco Polo times, Silk Road time, ancient Persia time. This was a caravanserai. Every camel's walk, days camels hike apart, there'd be a Motel 6, all right, with a good safe garage, a restaurant, and a little nightclub, okay? All within a nice fortified whatever you do when you circle the wagons, okay? Think about that. If you were those Marco Polo guys with all this good stuff from China coming back to Europe, every day's march, you'd have one of these. And to go there and to be thinking about what that was like was really fun. On the field across the street from the caravanserai, I saw this guy who was whipping these stones with a sling exactly like David had for Goliath. It's a biblical scene that we saw there. And this guy was like a little teenager whipping rocks across his about his barley field all day long, keeping the birds off. And it was just fun to watch that, a timeless scene. In the middle of his field, he had a modestly attired scarecrow. And as we're driving, it was fun just to stop in little towns that never saw an American or a foreign film crew and get out and shoot whatever we could shoot. Here's Carl shooting the bakery, and people would come and pick up their bread for the day. For the whole first week, I was so excited about everything, and I was running back to our friend who's the bus driver, and I would call him Najef, I think, and I would be going like this. Yeah, we got it. You know, hooray, we got that. It was really good. And then later on he said, my name's not Najef, that's a city in Iraq. It's something else, and I forget his name. And this is the same as in your country giving somebody the finger. Okay? So for the rest of the trip, we were both doing this at each other as just a little joke. But when you go to Tehran, cut this out, okay? It's not going to help you. Our driver was so thoughtful, and you know, they don't have enough money to take you over to Starbucks, but they've always got their little kit there for your tea or your coffee, and we'd have little breaks like that, or donuts at the end of a long day of work. And you know, in my work in Europe, I'm always looking for the untouristy places. In Iran, I wanted the touristy places, all right? Give me a touristy restaurant, all right? And our guide was good at finding us touristy restaurants, and we'd eat very well. And Syed was, I still don't know why he was filming us the whole time. It's got to be the most boring little home video he's got. And we came to Persepolis. I went to Iran back in the late 1970s, just in the last days of the Shah, and my big regret was I didn't get down to Persepolis. All my life I've been regretting that. I've built it up in my mind. It's one of these sites that, you know when you get there, it'd be a little bit of an anticlimax. I finally got there, and it did not disappoint. It exceeded my wildest expectations. Persepolis is the greatest ancient site between the Mediterranean and India. And when you go there today, you find this ugly tarmac out in front with these gross parking lot kind of lighting at this great site. What's going on? Well, this is the remnants of the Shah's extravagant party in 1971 or something like that. You remember that when he invited Aristotle, Nassus, and all the big shots, flew him into Persepolis, which is really out in the nowhere, and he flew in dinner from all the fanciest restaurants in Paris, and it was this most extravagant display of wealth you could imagine, and it was really considered by historians the beginning of the end of the Shah, because when he did that, the terrible poverty in his society looked at that and just said, this man has got to go. So I think they leave that there as a reminder, because when we met Iranians that were going to Persepolis, they were going there to sort of celebrate their roots, their Persian roots. And when you remember, when you're talking to Iranians, first of all, they're not Arabs. They're very clear about this. They're Persians. They don't speak Arabic. Most Americans think they speak Arabic. No, they speak Farsi. And when you talk to them, they make it really clear. I mean, it's not the Gulf of Arabia, it's the Persian Gulf. You know, they told us that many times. And their greatest experience is to really commune with the greatness of their culture by going back to the days of Xerxes and Persian Empire in its zenith, 500 years BC. And people come here. And we saw people like this who were, having a great national holiday of their own by going to the roots of their great civilization, which was not Muslim, but it was Zoroastrian, which is they say it's the first monotheistic religion. You look at the tombs of these great emperors, and they are on the scale, really, of the pharaohs in Egypt. And it blew me away to go there and check out all this. Here's where we saw a lot of Western tourism. Traveling to Iran is a lot like a Cuban cigar. It's a big deal for an American, but everybody else does it routinely. The Lonely Planet Guide to Iran is a big seller. They just came out with a new edition. I don't think you'll meet many Americans that buy it, but Canadians, Germans, Australians, Brits, they go there in droves. Now, Iran today is a lot like the Soviet Union from a tourism point of view. They want tourism, they want the money, they want the exposure to the West. When we asked for permission to film, they recognized they get a bad shake from the press. They wanted us to give them a good shake, that's why they let us in. They want tourism, they actually do, but they don't get how to make tourism, and you have to take a tour. If you're a Westerner, you got to take a tour like you used to do with the Soviet Union. It's the same kind of fear of having Westerners roaming around on their own, unless you got relatives or something. You met a lot of tour groups here. They would always have their scarves on, and they would always have their local guide. You met a lot of younger travelers with their Lonely Planet book that had a guide having tea somewhere, just because you have to have a guide, but they would turn them loose and they would do their own thing. From Persepolis, our last stop was going to Shiraz, and Shiraz is a city with a rich history, a great market, wonderful chance to get out and see the people, but what is most important about Shiraz is the tombs of its poets. And when you go to Iran, you realize there's almost a religion for the great poets of that society. And flowery, beautiful poets of love, really. And people go on, it's like dressing up on a Sunday afternoon to go to some great cultural center. The people in Shiraz would go there and they'd sit over the pond and meditate or read the poems of their favorite poet at his tomb. And that was a very powerful little glimpse of the society that I still don't understand very well. Everybody told me, if you're going to eat well in Iran, it's going to be in somebody's home. And we wanted to get into somebody's home, but it's scary to have an American film crew come into your home. I wanted to see everybody kicked back and relaxed and doing their own thing, which happens, but as soon as you take the camera into their home, it's like you're outside, you know what I mean? Everybody is dressed modestly and in good behavior. It's just the cultural norm. So we went into this very gracious home, and this man is quite wealthy. He's got a couple of shops, and the women had to wear their scarves, and we had a glorious dinner, and they just pulled out all the stops. We got to meet the kids, and it's a wealthy home, and it felt very much like a wealthy home in the United States. And this is really a cool scene for me. I just thought, oh, okay, the company has worn out its welcome. When are these people going to go home? I think I'll just curl up on the big chair in the TV room. It could happen in suburban America, just like in a fancy home in Shiraz. Well, from there, we flew back to Tehran, and it was like coming home after being away from Tehran for 10 days or something, and it was great to wrap things up there. We were thankful to have all of our gear in one piece, all of our footage, and flew out of there and came home with a lot of powerful memories and the determination to help our country better understand that country. Thank you very much. Kurt. Oh yeah, thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you.